Hey guys, got a cool project going on I wanted to show you. We picked up these two burls here. There's one right here, and then there's one, if I can point in the right direction, right up here on the other side of the log. I'm going to show you. Burls can come in all sorts of different shapes. This one here is, was at the base of the tree. You can see it just basically bulges out. This has, let's see if I can find an area. Okay, so here the bark has come off. Get this to focus in the right area. The bark has come off, and there's these really sharp, pokey pins. Here's another area, and that's basically what. There's a real good area. This needs milled because it's drying out, starting to crack. It's not good. But it's too big for my sawmill. I've got a guy lined up, I think, who can be able to slice that for me, but that needs to happen soon because that's starting to degrade, which is not good. The one we're gonna work on today is this right here. And this totally, I don't know what causes the burls, but this has a really really funky grain pattern going on. Like some burls can just be swirly grain, they don't, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but more just, it's like regular grain, and then somebody took a straw and just stirred it, to kind of make the grain patterns just go in a swirly pattern. The spikes are what's most desirable, I feel like. Those make for some really cool eyes. It's a really cool pattern. A lot of the fake veneer that you see is going to have that pattern. So for whatever that's worth, if they're imitating it, they want to imitate that. This, I don't know what, I'm sure there's a technical name for this. A lot of the Australian burls have, I would say, kind of look like this, at least from what little knowledge I have. But there again, this is way too big to throw. This log is probably 12 foot long, and let me grab my tape here. We are 32-inch diameter, so it's gonna need to be trimmed to go on the sawmill anyway. So right now my thought is to take this and lob this off with my chainsaw. I've got a 36-inch bar. I should be able to cut that clean. It's got a crotch on that end anyway, so that's going to be my top surface as well, so I'm not overly concerned about obviously the burl is the main thing I want to harvest. I mean, we'll slab the whole tree, but I'd rather sacrifice a little bit of slab, log, whatever, the main part of the log, versus getting a good cut on the burl. So we're gonna get the chainsaw going and set that up and see if we can't. And there again, that burl is too wide to fit. I thought about just throwing the whole log and milling just that burl off of there, but it's kind of a oval, running lengthwise up and down here. So I'm gonna hopefully cut that off, and then we'll flip that sideways and run it lengthwise on my sawmill so we can get that processed. There again, the bark is coming off, so this one's not cracking quite as bad, but it's definitely high time to get this cut and get it drying. So we're gonna go grab the chainsaw and see if we can get this whacked off. feel like we got a pretty good cut. I don't see any burl that we really left on the tree, so that's always good. You always want to make sure you cut deep enough. We do have this little hole here. We'll see how hollow that is. Get it haul this thing over to the mill.
My dad stopped by. They have some grain facilities here on our place, and that they still use, and he was working on some of that, but he wanted to come check out what we were milling there, and just want to give him a shout out, man. He has helped out a lot getting our business up and going, especially on the logging end of things. He farms, and so we're always salvaging a lot of trees and whatnot off of some of the creek bottom ground and whatnot, as well as just helping us get going in the shop and everything.
Looks like the ants got into this thing pretty good, but if you like epoxy, that can be a plus. These hollows go way deep down. I imagine we'll be finding ants the whole way. But that is just some cool stuff right there. That'll look awesome with a little bit of epoxy and all those voids. It's cool because it's still got a lot of wood, and you could even put a glass top on something like that. Would look really cool. If you wanted to put a, these are 30-inch, so you could put a, you know, get a 36-inch round glass top to put on there. Would look pretty awesome. But we're gonna keep cutting, see what else we run into. Get you positioned right here. There we go. How cool will that be with some epoxy in there? I'm not a huge epoxy fan, but something like that I could definitely get behind. That'll be pretty cool.
So I just wanted to jump in here real quick and kind of explain what's going on. I started getting a dip in my cuts, and the way the grain is oriented, I'm cutting the wrong direction. Instead of cutting across the tree, I'm cutting in line with the tree, if that makes sense, and that can be an issue as far as just keeping a straight cut. I was probably pushing my speed a little too fast. My blade, you can see I'm testing it here, and it still seemed halfway sharp. I am dealing with some set issues as well, I think. I need to double check that, but that's kind of what's going on. It's just when you cut in line with the wood grain instead of against it, it tends to get a little squirrely.
So I thought we needed to change the blade, but it still feels pretty sharp. I think we're just pushing it a little bit hard. This tree has been down for a while, so the wood itself is pretty dry. I noticed even that when cutting it with a chainsaw. So I think I just need to slow my feed rate down just a little bit. Hopefully keep that cut just a little bit flatter. We had a little bit of dip in one area where it dove down. So hopefully we can avoid that just by slowing our feed rate down just a little bit. So we got it all cut. Flip this back around. And what I was doing there with that shovel handle is what we're running into is we're maxed out. This sawmill can cut 28 inches. This is a standard head LT40. And it maxes out at 28 inches, and we're just right there. And to get to that 28 inches, you have to be a little past. So the cutting line is where that blade guide lines up is probably about, hard to say, but just a little inside this frame here. And these stops are another 3 inches in, so you can really only get, with them stops, you can only get about 25 inches. So in order to combat that, we put these spacers which go over these. So basically, regularly you cut a log into a cant, and then once you get it to a cant, then your flat surface will go on here, and then it hits against that, and you can drop your log dogs out of the way. But it needs something to hit against, so it has these little stops here. But to be able to move our cut over, we're putting these little spacers under my slab so I can move that over enough. I really would have rather not had to trim this up, but I was kind of had limited options there. You can see all this fluff. That's not what sawdust is supposed to look like. We're cutting it. The tree ran this way, so we're doing a rip cut essentially, and that's part of the reason I'm not getting a real flat cut, I think, because my blade is sharp. I'm going pretty slow, but all these shavings, that's an indication that we're doing a rip cut and not a cross cut. You know, if the grain's running this way, and that's running the blade the same direction as the grain, which is not, versus you should be, if your tree's running this way, your blade should be going 90 degrees to the grain, basically. But anyways, we got that milled. Went and skimmed this last bottom just to straighten that out. But we will get these stacked and get them drying. And these are gonna make some cool tables here. It'll be later this year at least before we get them dried. But we'll keep you posted. Hopefully post some pictures once we get them all dry. Now the fun part, cleaning everything up and stacking. So thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it, and check out all my other videos. We're trying to do more sawmill videos. It seems like people really like that, especially the walnut. So stay tuned, and we'll see you another time.